What's up, everybody? Happy fun Monday fun day. My name is Dan Kornhauser.
My name is Sam Teets.
And thank you guys for tuning in for our second NFL draft show here on The Grueling Truth. And before we get started, Sam, I just want to let everybody know that The Grueling Truth, this show, is powered by betting.net. Betting.net is your best bet for sportsbook and casino sites. So get on over to betting.net. And don't you worry, we'll be reminding you throughout the show where to go. But let's kick this one off. We've got some fun topics to discuss regarding the NFL draft, of course. And we're going to start in college. We're going to start with the Heisman Trophy. Bryce Young was awarded the Heisman Trophy over this week. And I think it was Saturday he got it. And he got the trophy. I think Aiden Hutchinson was second, which pretty cool considering he's a defensive player. Doesn't happen that often. But at the end of the day, this award typically goes to the best player, normally a quarterback, on the best team, pretty much, is what this normally comes down to. So it was no surprise that Bryce Young got the award, considering where Alabama sits, the kind of season he had, over 40 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, an amazing season for the sophomore. I need to ask you, Sam, where does Bryce Young stack for you compared to this year's class of quarterbacks? Now, he's a sophomore, so he can't come out, but yeah, where does he stack for you?
I mean, it's pretty simple. He's got to be at the top because class we moved out, that crowd for me is the de facto top quarterback in this class because he hasn't done anything to lose that spot. But he hasn't really held either. Kenny Pickett has risen the rankings quite a bit. But Kenny Pickett to me is not a top 10 pick. And you talk about other guys like Sam Howell, Malik Mills, maybe being first-round guys because teams need quarterbacks, but not because they're proven to be first-round caliber guys. So someone like Bryce Young to me, now granted he could come in next year and struggle quite a bit and maybe fall off. We've seen that from guys in the past. But guys like Bryce Young, even C.J. Stroud, would probably rank at the top of this class if they were eligible to come out this year.
You put both of them at the top of this class if they were eligible.
Definitely Bryce Young. Stroud to me is a little bit of a coin flip because he was not very good to start the year. I know he put the numbers up in the first couple of games, but if you watch him, he was high and away on so many throws. He's gotten much better now, of course. Towards the end of the season, he's much, much better. But I would still like to see another year of him playing at a fully elite level before making that proclamation of him being potentially a top 5 pick.
I do believe Stroud finished 4th in these final Heisman voting rankings behind Pickett. Hutchinson and of course Young. Now, with Young, where would you stack him against last year's class of quarterbacks? Or, well, this year, 2021.
That's a little more difficult. Definitely behind Trevor Lawrence. We can start off with that. I feel like Trevor Lawrence is kind of always going to go first overall.
100%.
Even though he struggled quite a bit this year. He threw 4 interceptions this past weekend, but part of it's where he's landed as opposed to what he's done so far. And Bryce Young, to me, a little bit of a smaller quarterback stature-wise, but overall, I think he's a very polished guy. And we're looking at the quarterback class from this past year. Maybe teams like Zach Wilson more, because Zach Wilson can escape, he can create downfield. Like, Zach Wilson struggled quite a bit this year, don't get me wrong. But Zach Wilson, be able to create downfield, the arm talent, the ability to create off-platform, that kind of stuff would really probably jump out to teams. I think Bryce Young at either maybe 2, or some teams would probably pass Zach Wilson, but also 3 for sure. Ahead of someone like Trey Lance, who only has 1 year as a starter, not in the FBS. So 1 year, so definitely over Trey Lance. I think over Justin Fields, considering how far Justin Fields fell down the draft board. And probably over Mac Jones. Mac Jones has benefited quite a bit from playing behind a very good Patriots offensive line and with a very good Patriots backfield.
Okay. Me personally, I'd have to agree with you. I know there are other analysts and people who watch both the NFL and follow college football closely. And there's not a lot of them, but I personally know at least a couple that weren't that high on Trevor Lawrence coming into this year's draft. They have their reasons, and as much as I disagree with their reasons, they are what they are. But I'm not on that ship. I think Trevor Lawrence was the clear top quarterback in this year's class. The majority is there. I know the majority doesn't matter, but he had everything you'd look for. Everything. He was a winner. He was the prototype with the size, the arm, the intelligence, the leadership. I mean, he had it all coming out of Clemson. So it should be pretty much a no-brainer, as you said, with Lawrence. And I'd probably have Bryce Young second as well, second on my board. As this kid coming out next year, he could be the next superstar quarterback. And I think Stroud is not too far behind him either. I think he's going to be something special in the league too. And I think next year's class, unlike this year where we don't really know who's going to go one, for most of the year it was Thibodeau, but now Hutchinson may be rising or someone else, Neal maybe, who knows. But those two seem to be at the top of the boards now at this point in the season. But next year, we're going to have two clear-cut top picks. It's going to be him and it's going to be Anderson. Young and Anderson, the pass rusher from Alabama, who I know we talked about this very, very briefly off the air, Sam, but you have a particular opinion about Anderson not being a part of the Heisman ceremonies this year.
Yeah, I don't understand. I understand C.J. Stroud was a good quarterback this year for Ohio State. Will Anderson, you look at the voting. I actually had the voting numbers pull up in front of me right now. Bryce Young won in a landslide, of course, 684 first-place votes. Aiden Hutchinson second with 78 first-place votes. Kenny Pickett, 28. C.J. Stroud, 12. Will Anderson Jr., 31 first-place votes. The third most first-place votes of anyone on this ballot was not invited to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. I just don't understand. I mean, he has basically the same sack numbers as Aiden Hutchinson. He's got maybe 4 or 5 fewer pressures. He's right there. He's got, according to like Sports Reference, I think he has over 20 tackles for loss this year, which is more than Aiden Hutchinson. So I just don't understand how you leave this guy out in the cold. I understand maybe you don't want 2 Alabama guys there, and C.J. Stroud is the quarterback of Ohio State. I understand there's some precedent to that being a very prominent position. But Will Anderson Jr., just statistically, was so much more unique in what he was able to accomplish than what C.J. Stroud did. I just can't believe you overlook Will Anderson Jr. in this conversation and don't bring him to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony.
So if you would have had him, who would you have taken out of that top 4?
Probably Stroud, just because, again, Kenny Pickett had a great year this year. He's got the whole narrative. He's playing in an offense where he's got Jordan Addison at receiver, and that's basically the only NFL caliber player you know for certain is on that roster right now. C.J. Stroud, he's working with 3 future first-round wide receivers on his team. 2 are coming out this year, 1 coming out next year. So to me, it has, and of course the offensive line too has a couple of future NFL players on it as well. Kenny Pickett was always going to stay in. Bryce Young won, obviously. Aiden Hutchinson came in second. Will Anderson Jr. seems like the most obvious guy taking place of C.J. Stroud because Stroud, again, playing with a lot of NFL talent, was not that great early in the year. And I just think statistically does not match up to Bryce Young and Kenny Pickett.
Dude, Anderson had an amazing season. By no means did he fly under the radar. Size-wise, he has exactly what you look for off the edge. You know he's getting the right coaching at Alabama. That's never going to be a question as long as Nick Saban is there. But the stats, the raw stats are so impressive. He has more quarterback hurries between this year and last year than anyone else in the SEC. And we know what kind of defenders the SEC throws out every year and the kind of NFL prospects they have and the kind of NFL defenses that a lot of those SEC teams run. So pretty impressive for a guy in his sophomore season. But you did bring something up very interesting, and I want to circle back to that. But before we do, I want to remind everyone that your top sportsbook comparison site is betting.net. Betting.net offers extensive reviews on the best sports books out there. Visit betting.net. You had mentioned, Sam, the quarterbacks, one of the quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, was struggling. He just threw 4 interceptions in a shutout loss. I think it's their first shutout since like 2014 or something like that is what I read. Things are at an all-time low in Jacksonville, like you said. Aside from Lawrence, we have, I think, 4 other rookies who are starting at quarterback in the NFL right now. One of them is not Trey Lance, but he'll be getting his time soon. But of the 5 rookie starters right now, which would be Davis Mills in Houston, Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, Wilson for the Jets, of course, like you said, Mac Jones for the Patriots, and now that he's back from injury, Justin Fields for the Chicago Bears. Of those 5 quarterbacks, Mac Jones is having the best year. They're winning in New England. He looks really good. He's not throwing interceptions. He's not making dumb, boneheaded rookie mistakes that all these other guys are making. It's safe to say this rookie class this year in their rookie seasons has been underwhelming, to say that very nicely. Are you concerned about this rookie class at all?
Yeah, I am. And it's not so much about the quarterbacks in general as it is maybe their development being derailed by the situations around them.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like if you could go back and almost delete this season for these guys to kind of wipe away their first year in the NFL, they might be better off because someone like Zach Wilson was dealt with injuries and has played behind a bad offensive line with a supporting cast that has somewhat not lived up to the hype this year. Or Trevor Lawrence, who was basically lost DJ Chark. You lose most of your supporting cast. You're playing behind an offensive line with veterans on them who's not done well at all. It's just like, I do not understand. Like, some of these teams took quarterbacks and they were not prepared to have a rookie quarterback. Not at all. And it's just at a point, like the Bears do not have an offensive line to protect Justin Fields with. They are not ready. And so really, to me, it's not so much on the rookie quarterbacks as it is on the teams that took them and their inability to prepare to build a franchise around these quarterbacks. I want to see what happens next year when these squads have another season to draft and go through free agency and hopefully realize the mistakes they made and try to fix those offenses to kind of build up those quarterbacks.
I actually agree with you on that front in that I don't think it's so much that these rookie quarterbacks aren't what we thought they were in some senses, like a Trevor Lawrence. I mean, this guy was coming out and some people were throwing out the name Andrew Luck. The name Andrew Luck hadn't been thrown out since Peyton Manning or John Elway. Like, that was the class of quarterback that Trevor Lawrence was in coming out of Clemson. He had everything he needed. Trophies, wins, all that stuff. Had it all. That's not something to just forget about just because he's 4 months into his career and it's not quite right. I also blame most of these rookie quarterbacks' issues on situation. Like you said, a lot of these teams aren't good. They weren't good last year. They're just as bad in most cases this year. Jacksonville is a complete disaster. Everyone I've spoken to about this thinks Jacksonville has to move on from Urban Meyer.
Oh, yeah.
Yesterday, okay? People are talking about they should have fired him already. They should have fired him when he was still in Ohio, bumping and grinding with some hot chick at the bar, all right? They should have fired him back then is what a lot of people think even to this day. The fact that we haven't heard anything from their owner, Khan, I think is a little concerning. All he's done is pretty much back Urban Meyer and supported Meyer and the team and stuff like that. But something's got to be done about this. I think it goes beyond the weapons because DJ Chark getting hurt or whatever was a problem, but it's not like they don't have other pieces. They still have Robinson at running back. Marvin Jones has played well for them this year. He's not getting as much love as he should, and he's not a superstar wide receiver, but as a wide receiver 2 or something like that at this point, he'd be a really good piece, and he's actually shown out for them at times this year. But I feel bad for Trevor Lawrence in that sort of a situation because he's getting absolutely no help. That offensive line is atrocious. They refuse to run the ball, and when they do, Carlos Hyde is still getting touches. I don't know what's going on with Urban Meyer on that front. I don't care. I don't care how much you love a player as a coach, how great he was for you when he played for you in the past, how much of a leader he was, what history. It doesn't matter. I think at a certain point, like with Tim Tebow, he tried it with Tebow, didn't work, gone in the preseason. That's how it should have been. Yeah. It would have been a disaster if you kept Tebow on in any capacity besides maybe like a coach, assistant coach or something like that. But with Carlos Hyde, this guy, it's like watching somebody running in mud. He has no burst. I don't know what he's thinking. I know Trevor Lawrence came out recently and talked positively about Robinson and demanded that Robinson see the field more. And then they responded this past week by running the ball like 8 times as a team. Just a disaster.
Yeah, it's all funny.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look at what's going to happen in Chicago, too. Like, Matt Nagy's going to get fired in Chicago. They're probably going to clean house in the Bears. And New York, I don't blame Robert Saleh for the issues that happened in New York. There's a lot of other stuff going on there. Give him another year. I feel very confident in him having at least one more year to try to figure this stuff out. probably two. Even though Zach Wilson is actually one of the more worrisome quarterbacks to me because there have been moments where he seems to create his own flaws instead of playing into the flaws of his team. He seems to make his own mistakes. And someone like Davis Mills, I mean, do we even know what's going on in Houston with David Culley? Do we even know that Davis Mills is going to be? I can't really evaluate that situation or Davis Mills considering how bad that team is. And I don't know if David Culley is going to be even there next year. This might just be a bridge kind of head coach.
Yep.
So it's hard to evaluate those guys. Trey Lance, again, hasn't really played. And Mac Jones playing behind this dominant offensive line, full of these guys who are terrific with the running game. If you want to, on a windy night, you can run the ball 60-something times and never throw it. So it's just, he's in the best scenario. He's playing like the best quarterback out there because he's got the supporting cast around him. And granted, he has made some very impressive plays this year. I don't want to water it down and say it's all the supporting cast. He has made really impressive plays this year. But I also think that you put Trevor Lawrence in that situation or something like that, you're going to get solid production as well.
Man, you put Trevor Lawrence in New England, they're probably undefeated right now, maybe one loss. This kid probably looks like a Pro Bowl quarterback because he's got the GOAT coach in a GOAT system with, like you said, all the support a young quarterback could possibly want. An elite defense, elite offensive line, elite running game, elite coaching staff, two above average tight ends when healthy. The system is just built for that type of a quarterback to succeed. I'm very, very excited to see what Trey Lance can do. I know he got some playing time when Garoppolo was injured earlier in the season, and it was very much up and down. There were flashes of very good talent. We know he can make all the throws. We know he's got that running ability, and he showed it earlier in the season. But he also showed he needed a lot of refinement, which is what we knew coming out. You don't come from North Dakota State to the NFL and just start bombing it and being a GOAT. You could, but in this case, it was a pretty fair guess to say he probably wasn't going to be doing that. But I think I'm not ringing the bell on this rookie class. I mean, I'm a little more concerned with Zach Wilson of anyone in this group. I am in New York, so I hear the radio waves every single day. We get all the Jets and Giants games, so I watch these bad teams. And yes, Wilson shoots himself in the foot more often than not. This past week was particularly gross because he had a wide open wide receiver 7 yards away and threw it 5 yards over his head. And it wasn't because he was getting pressured or anything like that. It's just his mechanics are all off. He has no comfortability in this offense right now. And it doesn't help that they were missing 3 offensive line starters, their top 2 running backs, their top 3 wide receivers.
Yeah. Adds up eventually, right?
This sort of stuff adds up. To expect these guys to come out of like BYU, for example, and overcome that sort of adversity in their rookie season, even if it's 10 games into their start, into their career or whatever, 12 games started, whatever it is for him. It's not realistic. It just isn't. So I'm not ringing the bell on this quarterback class. I have concerns more short term with some of these guys, but for the most part, I just want to see how this plays out with these guys, and we'll see as things go. But let's shift gears. Let's go to enough quarterbacks. All right, the quarterbacks are always going to get the love. That's the premier position in sports. We're going to talk a lot about quarterbacks leading up to this draft. Other than the fact that there's 4 or 5 quarterbacks who can go in the first round and none of them are surefire top prospects at this time, that adds to the intrigue. But it's the position. We know what goes on there. But let's talk about the non-premium positions, okay? We know quarterbacks, left tackles, corners, pass rushers. We know those are the top guys. They get drafted high. They get big money every offseason. But that's not fun to talk about. We know about those. We know how valuable those positions are. But it's about building a team, Sam. And on that team are non-premier position players. I'm talking about defensive tackles who may not necessarily be good pass rushers, safeties, tight ends, guards or centers, players that don't typically go high, top 10 or whatever, top 10, top 12. But you could take a Ryan Kelly in the 20s and plug him in as your starting center for the next decade, get a few Pro Bowls out of him, and you call that a win. You could draft a Steve Hutchinson at the back end of the top 10 picks. Early in the first round, pick a Steve Hutchinson, plug him in. You got a Hall of Fame guard for the next 15 years. That's not that common. Kyle Pitts last year. It took a freak of an athlete with prototype size in every way, stats that blow your mind away, film that was as impressive as Calvin Johnson when he was at Georgia Tech. Just throw it up to the man, because that was a grown-ass man playing with little boys in college, and he dominated the competition. It took something like that for a player of one of those non-premier positions to go high in the draft. And even now, teams are questioning, or analysts, fans are questioning if the Falcons made the right move at taking him fourth overall last year, when there were other quarterbacks on the board, other players on the board that could help them win games now more than a pass-catching tight end. So I ask you, Sam, outside of Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame, because that's the easy answer. I would say it, you would say it, damn near anybody who follows the draft would say it at this point. You don't even got to be an analyst. You don't got to do anything special. You can just be a fan of the sport and watch Mel Kiper on ESPN and hear Kyle Hamilton say, oh, yeah, Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame. Oh, yeah, everybody knows that. Him aside, who is the best non-premium position player on your board?
Well, highest one, I got a draft going for a top 100 board right now, and the highest guy that's not Kyle Hamilton, that's not premier position, is Tyler Linderbaum, who's a top 5 guy right now on my board. Not taking into account positional value, because if I was, he probably wouldn't be that high. But Tyler Linderbaum, a center from Iowa, it's just incredible what he's done. He's a little bit on the lighter side. He's a 290-pound center, which might scare some teams away. It might not be the scheme fit everyone's looking for. Especially you want to try to be like a New England Patriots team where everyone's like 350 pounds and going for just grinding the ball out. That might not be the case if you're looking at Tyler Linderbaum, like I said, on the lighter side. But this is going to be the best center of entering the NFL in a little while. You mentioned Ryan Kelly before. This guy's going to be better than Ryan Kelly. This guy is going to come in and be probably a top 7 or 8 center in the NFL from day one, I believe. And maybe it takes a little bit of adjustment because of the weight. But he's still playing in a conference that's known for physicality, that's known for defense, that's known for low-scoring games and just crazy weather and all this kind of stuff. And he comes out, and he's been dominant. I mean, over the 3 years at Iowa, he's allowed 19 pressures throughout his entire career with Iowa. That's on over 2,200 snaps. He's a really good player, and he plays above his weight. Like, he plays stronger than he looks. This is going to be a guy who's going to be a top 5 talent in terms of the NFL draft, but might not be taken until the mid-20s or so.
I love Tyler Linderbaum. He's absolutely going to have a first-round grade for me. It's not sexy. It is not sexy at all. You don't want to be sitting in the middle of the first round and have your team take a center at 15th overall or 18th overall or something like that. You look at, you're like, cool. We needed one, I guess, but it's not sexy at all. But good teams build up the trenches. It's been that way forever, and it will not change. You need to have a good defensive front. You need to have a good offensive front. And, yeah, you need a good bookend tackles, but look at what the Saints have done throughout when Drew Brees was there throughout his career. Did they always have elite tackles? Not necessarily. I mean, Armstrong and other guys, Armstead rather, and other guys have been successful at the tackle position for the Saints over the years, but they heavily invested interior. Bentley at center over the years. Who's Jari Evans, I think.
Yeah, it was really good for them for a long time.
A superstar guard, and they built the inside of that offensive line. Even recently with Ruiz that they drafted and took in the first round a couple of years ago. They've added McCoy at center. So they've added throughout Sean Payton's tenure there quality. They've invested quality draft picks and money on the interior offensive line, and it's for a reason. You want to give your guy a clean pocket on the inside to step up, and if you have an undersized quarterback like a Drew Brees who's not 6'5", 230 pounds, not the prototype, maybe 6 foot, got to look over the line, kind of lean back a little bit, have that high release to get it over the line, over guys jumping. You're going to want a guy like Tyler Linderbaum. And I don't give high grades like that to centers and guards often, but this guy is 100% worthy. I'm a little disgusted that you mentioned him because he's going to be up there. But I'm going to go with Nakobe Dean.
Yeah,
the
that's a good one.
Linebacker from Georgia. When you're looking at today's NFL and you're building your squad and you need to add a linebacker, the days of a Ray Lewis type, a guy who's going to just patrol the middle of the field, stuff the run, be a big physical, intimidating presence in the middle, those days are damn near gone. Now all the wave is getting sleek, fast, torpedo-like linebackers who get to the ball quick, who can cover, who can maybe rush the passer. We see what Micah Parsons is doing. We've seen what Devin White has been doing. Roquan Smith. That's the direction the league is going. Teams have to find a way to respond to these offenses that are getting all the love in the rules. You can't touch quarterbacks. You can't hit receivers going over the middle of the field. You can't do a lot of things when you're on defense. So teams got to adjust. And how have they been adjusting? They've been finding these athletic linebackers, maybe former safeties, taking them high in, some of them taking the top prospects, taking them high in the draft, plugging them in, and you don't got to worry about the position for the next decade. Yes, the guys that I mentioned are the top of the top, but even a guy like Isaiah Simmons for the Cardinals, he didn't really have a position coming out of Clemson, but that's because he played every position. He played safety, both in the box and in the middle of the field. He covered tight ends and running back coming out of the back of the field. He rushed off the edge. He lined up on the line at the end. They moved him to inside linebacker, slot corner at times. Okay, they had him all over the field. Why? At 6'4", 240, we're not talking about 6 foot, 6'1", 220. It's a big guy, man. It's a big boy. And you got him playing slot corner and safety and then rushing off the edge. That kind of a weapon is worth its weight in gold. And for a guy like Dean, he may not be as big as that, 6 foot, give or take, 220, 225, give or take. He's more in that Devin White mold. He's got 2 picks, one of which went for a touchdown. He's got 61 total tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss. He's got 5 sacks, a forced fumble, 5 QB hurries. He's all over the field for this team. He is one of their defensive leaders. And I think if he's not a first-round pick, I think it would be a little surprising, at least at the tail end, potentially the first round, but definitely a second-round pick. The talent is there.
Yeah, an important stat with Nakobe Dean. He's allowing 4.4 yards per reception this year. That's very low. That's very good to be allowing under 5 yards per reception. Only allowed 14 catches on 26 targets this year. And that's what you need. You're looking for right now. NFL teams want a smaller linebacker capable of running with guys in space. And they want a guy who's going to lock you down defensively in terms of the passing game. Isaiah Simmons obviously is the freak of nature who has all the physical traits and stuff like that. But they want a guy like that. They want someone like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah this year for the Browns who just does a little bit of everything. That's what they want. They want a guy who they can actually take and put in the slot if they have to. And Nakobe Dean is that player. Someone like a Devin Lloyd, who's also a very good linebacker in this class, a little bit heavier, a little bit bigger. I like Devin Lloyd quite a bit, but he's a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier. Not quite the guy in coverage that Nakobe Dean is. But Dean is, people are going to ask about his size. I don't think the size matters, honestly. If he's really good in coverage, that's what you need. That's what you're looking for. Just ignore that and just go with Nakobe Dean if you're looking for a coverage linebacker.
I love it. But we're going to take a quick pause. I want to throw this out there. It's about betting.net. All right. You got to find the best place to bet for you. Betting.net offers expert and user reviews for every online sports book and casino in your state. Betting.net. So let's move on from the non-premium positions. That was awesome. I want to talk about when you're looking at players' physical measurements, height, weight, arm length, etc. How much does that affect your rankings if a guy doesn't necessarily have the prototype at his position? I mean, having an offensive tackle who doesn't have those long arms that you look for, having a quarterback with small hands, a corner who's 5'9" or 5'10". Does that stuff negatively affect players on your board? How does that factor into the whole process for you when you're putting your rankings together and putting your board together?
So one of the things you mentioned, I will take into account more than the others. It's arm length for tackles, because Braden Smith for the Colts is one of the few guys, I forget what length it is, but under a certain length in the NFL, you just don't find tackles that are successful. Braden Smith being one of the rare guys who has this under, like, I forget what the number is exactly, but he's under a certain number, and he's still a very good tackle. But other than him, you can't really find any other guy out there who's made an impact. So arm length to me at tackle is a big deal. But I will say, all your stuff you mentioned, the size of the corner, Trent McDuffie this year is going to be real good. I don't care what size he is. Nakobe Dean at linebacker, I don't care if he's a little bit undersized. I don't care if he's 6 foot, maybe 5 to 10 pounds less than you're expecting for a linebacker. I'm okay with that. Can he pass wear double gloves? I do want to see him throw an NFL ball, but I do feel pretty comfortable with what I've seen so far from him in college. DeMarvin Leal on the defensive line. Bit of a tweener size-wise, 290 pounds, shorter arms than you'd like. I still feel pretty comfortable putting him in the first round. So to me, a lot of these physical limits, even like Ahmad Gardner being a little bit high-hipped in terms of his build, I'm okay with that. I'm willing to take a bet on players who I know are good college players and good football players in general, despite some physical limitations. I don't really view that as being a larger issue. So besides the arm length for tackles, because that historically has just been a big no-no, besides that one, I really doesn't affect my board that much.
The range for tackles that you're looking for is between 33.5 inches and 35.5. That's the sweet spot that we've seen typically from those quote unquote prototypes that we look so hard for when it comes to the draft this time of year. For me, you know what? I'm going to agree as well. The most important thing for me personally comes down to what you see on tape. The measurements are nice, but the measurements, the testing, stuff like that, that's supposed to cement your grades. It's supposed to emphasize certain players' abilities or deficiencies. If you saw on tape a corner who had, or a receiver who had trouble exploding out of his cuts, going to an out route, going to an post, or going to an in and out. When you see something like that on tape, and then you see a guy with a terrible cone split or whatever, that's supposed to say, okay, it makes sense. Like DK Metcalf, his thing coming out of college was how stiff he was in his hips, the lack of footwork on breaks, in and out of his breaks. There was a fear that he would be a one-trick pony where all he can do is run deep or run a simple slant and hope his speed and size wins every time. It has at times, but we've seen this year that the lack of route running refinement when Russell Wilson isn't in there at 100% has held Metcalf back. So it's stuff like that. Like you see the tape could show one thing, but if the tests show different, then maybe you go back and check stuff. But I don't worry about that sort of stuff really at all. Because, even with the arm length for tackles, we've seen a guy like Charles Leno, for example, have a shorter than average height, shorter than average arm length. And he was, at the very least, an average to above average starting left tackle for the Bears for the last few years. He fell off a little bit. Part of that was due to injury. But that comes with some value, particularly where they drafted him. So I think it could work in certain situations. Me personally, I don't really worry about that sort of stuff because, like you said, if he's a good football player, that doesn't go away because you're not this tall or your vertical isn't that great. That there's certain things that you can't teach just on the football field. So for me, I'll say that I go more towards with what I see on tape and how that translates to the NFL. Now, it is Monday. We're going to do something special. We're going to do something special both for us and for our viewers. Before we do, I just want to throw this out there. Betting.net finds the best promotions, offers, and bonus codes so you don't have to. Head over to their website now to take advantage of things like free bets and matching deposits. We're going to wrap up this week's episode with Mock Draft Mondays. Woo! Everybody loves a good mock draft, man. I'm a damn fiend. I do a mock draft every week for myself just because I can, and I save them, and I want to see how they change over the months. And I'm just a fiend for it. So we're gonna do a mock draft right now. We're not gonna do the whole first round, but we are gonna do the top 10 picks, and we're gonna ping pong these picks. And as we discussed prior to the show, I will be starting. The Lions do have the first pick. I am our resident Lions fan here. So the Lions have the first pick. The Jaguars have the second pick. With the first pick in our 2022 NFL Draft Show mock draft, first mock draft Monday, I'm going to have the Detroit Lions taking edge rusher Kayvon Thibodeau from Oregon. He's been, for the most part, the top prospect on 90% of the boards that I've seen. He's been the top prospect on my board. I have absolutely no concerns about him in terms of health or anything like that, despite the fact that he did miss a couple of games due to injury. I think he'll be fine. You plug him in, you hope the Detroit Lions coaching staff, Glenn and all these guys can teach him how to get some pass rushing moves, work on his hands. But physically, this guy was built in a lab. This is exactly what you want. Length, height, speed off the edge, bend. There's no quarterbacks to take. Quarterback is a top need. There's no quarterbacks worth taking right now. I'd be disgusted if the Lions took Pickett. As much as I like him as a prospect, if the Lions took him first overall, I'm 100% picking a new team. That being said, we don't do that here, and I don't jump out the window. I'm going to take Thibodeau, number 1 overall. Jaguars are on the clock.
I mean, it comes down to two prospects here, right? They need an offensive line. So there's Evan Neal's out there. But to me, there's only one guy this really can be. Because Evan Neal, while he's a good offensive tackle, he's not this generational prospect that's a surefire hit. You've got a guy in your roster, Cam Robinson, already. He was supposed to be a very good tackle from Alabama. He hasn't necessarily worked out. I'm thinking Aiden Hutchinson. I understand it's not the biggest point of need for Jacksonville. But look, whoever's coaching the Jaguars next year, and hopefully it's not Urban Meyer for Trevor Lawrence's sake, you don't have a very good team. Just draft as many talented players as you can. And to me, Thibodeau and Hutchinson are just on that upper echelon. They're two guys sitting alone right now when it comes to this draft class. To not take them back-to-back, not make them 1 and 2, would just be a crime. It would just be criminal by the organization to not take Aiden Hutchinson in this spot where basically you could potentially be getting the best player in this draft. At least he's my best player, at least for now, at the second overall spot. That's a steal, basically. Take him. Don't overthink it.
I love that, and they gotta add more around Lawrence, and it's not just the offensive side. That defense needs love. I know they took Kayvon Chazon a couple of years ago, but that has not panned out thus far. No. And we know the Giants showed us when they won their first Super Bowl against the Patriots. You can never have enough elite pass rushers, because in that Super Bowl they had 3 big pass rushers. It was Tuck, Kiwanuka, and Strahan.
Yep,
they had the big 3. So there's something to that. That hasn't changed. Now with the third pick, we have the Houston Texans, and I have been playing around with this pick every week. This third pick is ugly, and I hate it. I hate it so much, particularly for the Texans, because I sit here and I look at the board and I say, all right, do I go BPA, best player available? It's probably Kyle Hamilton. Do I take a swing on a corner like Derek Stingley Jr. and hope that he turns out to be a superstar Jalen Ramsey? Maybe. Do I go with an Evan Neal? Like you said, you need that bookend, and their offensive line could use some help for whoever is their eventual quarterback. And this is going to be a tough team to peg, because we don't know, like with the Jacksonville Jaguars, we don't know who their head coach is going to actually be, because I don't personally think it's going to be who they have currently. Cullen, whatever. I don't think it's going to be him. It can't be. This team just looks lifeless. So with that in mind, for this exercise, for shits and giggles, I'm going to say Kenny Pickett. He stands out to me of all these quarterbacks, the guy who can generate the most excitement both for fans and as an analyst, because you look at his game and he's got the moxie, he's got the arm, he's got the swag, he's got the leadership. Physically, you have no questions about his game. He's one of those where the hand size will come into question, but I don't care about that. And honestly, if I'm the general manager of the Texans and we need a franchise quarterback and we don't want to wait till next year, because next year we know the two studs are coming out, but who else is going to need quarterbacks? Is Detroit still going to need a quarterback? And if they do, they're going to be butt. So they're going to be picking in that top 3 again. Will the Giants be ass and pass on a quarterback this year? Go with Daniel Jones again, bring back the head coach, suck again, and hope for a top 5 pick and see what happens? There's a bunch of teams, the Panthers, the Eagles, the Vikings, the Saints, the Broncos, not only this year, but next year even. So it could get crazy. If I'm the Texans, they got needs literally everywhere. I don't think there could be a wrong answer here, but I'll go Kenny Pickett. Give himself a quarterback. Let's see what happens. The Jets are now on the clock.
Yeah, the Jets, their offensive line this year has been injured, so I can't fully judge them for being terrible, but they've been pretty bad at points this year. You already have Mekhi Becton, who you like quite a bit. He's one of the biggest offensive tackles in the NFL. But hey, if you have to choose between starting Evan Neal and Mekhi Becton at left tackle, that's a pretty good problem to have. I'm willing to take it. I don't care who starts at right tackle or left tackle. I'm taking Evan Neal here for the Jets. Zach Wilson has been on the run for his life. He just needs time to settle down and figure things out. I would love to get him like a true wide receiver 1. But you're not going to be taking a wide receiver in this draft in the top 10 picks. It just doesn't make sense. So taking an offensive tackle, someone you know is big and physical. Evan Neal, I'm not the biggest fan of him, I'll be honest, but for what it's worth, you're not going to be able to get him any further down the line. You cannot wait until your next pick at number, 7? You got the Giants picking next.
Yep, 7, yep.
Yeah, you got the Giants picking next. You can't wait for them, so you're going to take him now, and you get your bookend tackles hopefully set for the next 10 years.
Perfect. So, Thibodeau, Hutchinson, Pickett, Neal off the board, and the New York Giants are on the board with back-to-back picks. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. This pick, actually, the 5th pick, is coming from Chicago. How do you think Chicago feels about that trade last year, by the way? They get their franchise quarterback potentially, but they lose another top 5 pick. They must be disgusted.
Well, they're going to be even more disgusted when Ryan Pace isn't around to suffer for the consequences, because he's not going to be there next year to deal with it.
He better not be there next year to deal with it. That's neither here nor there. This pick is another tough one because it'll entirely depend on, at least for me, this is where it gets a little sticky because, yeah, Kyle Hamilton is still the top player on the board. Derek Stingley Jr. is still there, 2 elite prospects. But the Giants have an embarrassment of riches, I feel like, at the safety position. McKinney has come on his own later this year. Is he gonna do you really want to take another safety in that spot? Even a guy like Kyle Hamilton, who can play multiple positions, a la Isaiah Simmons. Maybe not to that level, but still pretty darn good. He's been one of the best, if not the best overall defender this year. So I thought about Hamilton. It sucks that Neal isn't here. I know Giants fans would be absolutely repulsed if he got taken by the Jets 1 pick in front of them. But that's the way the draft goes, baby. That's just how it goes. So do I go for one of those 2 defensive players? Do I go for a Charles Cross maybe from Mississippi State? Might be a little too high for him. A lot of ifs, a lot of ands, a lot of buts. Mostly buts. In this case, though, I'm going to go with Derek Stingley Jr. I have questions about his availability with the injuries he's dealt with this year. But his freshman tape, like we addressed last week, is some of the best stuff we've seen for that position. He shut guys down. His footwork was on point. He wasn't too grabby like some of these other top corners that we see coming out of college. He fits in pretty much any system. He can play on a man, press up. He can play off. He can play zone. And he's got the physical ability. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. I mean, everything you want, this guy can be. And I think with some changes coming to the Giants this offseason. If they move on from a guy like Bradbury at cornerback who's making a lot of money, I don't know if they release him outright or if they try to trade him, but that's been a rumor that's been floating around here on the radio and online and stuff like that and different stuff I listen to. So if they get rid of him, they'll be in the market for a corner. I think Stingley Jr. would be a great plug-and-play guy here for them if this is how the board falls.
Yeah, and like you said, the Giants are go back-to-back here. You got Stingley, got a really good corner here to potentially replace James Bradbury if he ends up leaving. That leaves basically 3 players on my board I'm considering. I'm not thinking about Kyle Hamilton either, just because the Giants have so many safeties. But right now you've got, on the offensive line, because we know the Giants' offensive line needs all the help it can get, there's Charles Cross, there's Ikem Ekwonu from NC State, who I like to be an offensive tackle, even though I think he could play guard at the next level. And there's George Karlaftis from Purdue at the edge. And you brought this up earlier. When the Giants were winning Super Bowls, what did they have that was so dominant? Pass rushers. Have they really had? I know they have one year of Olivier Vernon, but they have not had a really good pass rusher since Jason Pierre-Paul. And part of that's because their defensive formation is such a pain in the ass to draft for, because they really have no true edge rushers because they play like a 3-man front with all these heavy bodies. I'm counting on some changes in the front office and on the coaching staff this year. They're going to rework their defense. They're going to play a more friendly scheme they can actually draft for. George Karlaftis, to me, he's the pick. This is a lunch pail kind of guy. Dude gets so many pressures. He's this lunch pail guy, endless motor, tons of work. Not on the same level as Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeau, but still, he's a guy who wreaked havoc for a lot of these big teams. And again, you just need passers. You need some big guy to set the tone for your defense. Karlaftis is going to be that dude.
Do you have any questions with him against the run and how he can play a little too tall?
Yeah.
And gets a little too upright off the snap and has to depend too much on his upper body strength and stuff like that. Do you have any questions about that with his game?
I do. He does tend to get bogged down. He has a lower impact in the run game than you would expect for someone with his size. Yeah, however, I expect that to be adjusted because he does have the size physically. He's much heavier, not much heavier. He is heavier and built a little bit thicker and stronger than someone like Kayvon Thibodeau, obviously, and even a little bit more than Aiden Hutchinson. So I think you guys to put something like that out there, and you have to expect to be able to coach him up. That's something with the height, the pad height. You can adjust that. That's not something that's permanent. So I think that will be something you have to work on coaching with him because you can improve that. And if you do fix that, you've got a great overall defensive end. Not a guy who's going to be – he's not going to be like 16 sacks a year. He's not going to be 13 sacks a year. But he's going to be in that 8 to 12 range probably pretty consistently. And really, that's kind of what you need right now if you're the Giants.
I mean, I don't know if I like him this high, but, I can't argue with what you said there. Now, with the next pick, the New York Jets are back on the clock. This is the pick they got from Seattle at 7th overall. How's that for another team? Seattle traded for Jamal Adams, and their pick here is better than the player that they got back. I know they're not pleased about that, but here we are. The Jets are in a pretty spot. They're in a pretty spot. This actually is a spot I like for a team like the Jets because they can go a number of directions. Depending on how the pre-draft circuit goes, a receiver could catapult himself to the front with a crazy 40 or an amazing workout at the combine or something like that and push himself into that top 10 range because a lot of teams up there do need receiver talent. I know Drake London just declared out of USC. A bunch of these other guys are coming out. Jameson Williams is going to be up there. But I don't know how I feel about taking a receiver, like you said, at this point in the top 10. It could happen. It wouldn't surprise me. But at 7 overall, you want a difference maker. You want someone who's going to stand out. Since they went offensive line with their first pick, I think they would have to address their defense with this pick. And I think this is where Hamilton's fall comes to an end. I think Kyle Hamilton will be a great pick here for them. Their defensive system relies heavily on their safeties. So they lost both of their starters. Unfortunately, that's what happens in the NFL. So they lost both of their starters. Their secondary is decimated. Their young corners have been all right. So I don't think they take a Stingley here or anything like that. This isn't Rex Ryan's system where their corners are left on an island all the time with all-out blitzes coming from the front 7. So, but Kyle Hamilton on the board, 7th overall. He might very well be the best defensive prospect in the draft. But like we were talking about before, safety is one of those positions you don't really take in the top 5. It doesn't matter how good this player is, short of like a Sean Taylor-esque college career followed by, like running a 4.3 or whatever it was, and just blowing everyone away with his physicality on the field, his leadership, and then testing through the roof. That doesn't happen often. But Kyle Hamilton is something special. They can put him in different roles. He's like a Swiss Army knife type of guy. Notre Dame has used him all over the field. He's not just a box safety. He can cover. He can run. He's an all-around defensive prospect, and the Jets fans would be ecstatic if they walked away from the first round with Evan Neal and Kyle Hamilton, 2 building blocks on either side of the ball. And with that, the Carolina Panthers are on the board with the 8th overall pick.
Yeah, the Panthers in their awful quarterback situation, but you took Kenny Pickett, and I'm not really feeling Matt Corral at this point. So I'm just going to stay focusing on building those premier positions we talked about earlier. And right now, they need help at offensive line. I think the stat out there is they've had a different starting left tackle every year since Jordan Gross retired, I think in like 2013 or something like that. They have not had stability at left tackle whatsoever. And I'm looking at someone like Charles Cross, who of course is coming from a very unique offensive system from Mississippi State. But the man had 719 pass blocking snaps this year. 719. And he only allowed 16 pressures and 2 sacks. That is elite production against SEC defensive pass rushers that are all very talented. And again, he's not necessarily having to block for an extended period of time sometimes in that Mississippi State offense, but still, only allowing that much when that many snaps is super impressive, and that's why he's risen up so many draft boards so quickly. And just looking at the positions that need to be filled here for this Carolina team, you took a cornerback this past year. The top 3 edge rushers are already off the board. I don't want to take Matt Corral here. I don't want to reach, even though Carolina not taking another quarterback, skipping on taking a quarterback again in back-to-back years probably would be viewed a little bit negatively by the fan base. I still think the best shot is to try to build up that offensive line and give your quarterback a shot. I'm taking Charles Cross here.
Charles Cross, Mississippi State. I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. Just put that in there. That's what she said. And with the 9th pick, the Atlanta Falcons are on the board, and they are in a similar situation. Only for them, it's not that they don't have a quarterback. It's just that their quarterback is 100 years old. Okay, maybe not that old. But Matt Ryan's getting up there in age. This is another team that's rebuilding. We'll see what happens with Calvin Ridley when he comes back, if he comes back. He stepped away from the team for personal reasons. So I hope whatever he's going through and whatever the situation was that made him step away from football, I hope he comes back better than ever. Whatever stuff he's dealing with gets sorted out, and he comes back because he is a hell of a receiver, one of the best, most talented young players this league has. With him and Kyle Pitts going in, not getting double teamed or triple teamed every down because he's their only offensive weapon in the passing game, that's a nice 1-2 punch. I think Matt Ryan still has another year or 2 left in him, at least. It's not ideal, but and his team's not going to be competing for a championship or anything like that anytime soon. But they're one of those teams that they could stand to add to their offensive line. They could stand to add, another pass rusher. Looking at their roster, there's injuries and stuff like that you got to account for, but it's not pretty. I know they've spent a lot of resources on edge rushers and interior rushers and stuff like that. Davidson from Auburn, recently they drafted, and Fowler, who they re-signed. But for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked out. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just the coaching, the scheme, whatever it is. Now, this is a weird spot because I don't know if I want to go this early with a David Ojabo, who I absolutely love. I don't know if I want to go with like an interior guy like the Marvin Leal or this sucks. I should have thought this out a bit more moving forward. But this class isn't. It's one of those draft classes where it's very, very much going to be what's your flavor at different spots and different positions, because we know that the Falcons aren't changing their coach. They just brought in Arthur Smith. He's in his first year. It's been pretty bad and very much up and down, but they're not a team that's going to replace him or anything like that. They're also a team that I don't think they go with a receiver or something like that. So this might be a good spot for them to trade down. This might be if someone's trying to move up for one of these quarterbacks or someone like that. They could trade down and get a few picks, keep building it, and hope for the best. But quarterback, edge rusher, defensive line, safety, I think are their biggest needs right now. Unfortunately, if we're going by positional value, there ain't much out there, and I don't want to give them the defensive lineman from Georgia, the big boy.
No, way too early for that.
It's way too early. I don't want to go there. Can I say trade down? No, I'm not going to do that. You know what? I'm gonna go with Matt Corral here. Coral. I'm going to go with him here just because I hate these other options. I don't trust to go with like a Drake London or Garrett Wilson or Jamison Williams or anyone like that, a receiver, even though I think they might still go with Matt Ryan and try to build it around him. Maybe they learn from their mistake this year. I don't think it was a mistake. I love Kyle Pitts, but maybe they think, okay, we gotta have a life after Matt Ryan and go with another Matt. He ain't Matty Ice, but he's got the physical talent you look for. In the SEC, he's been successful. I have a few questions about him. I don't trust this right now for him being a top 10 pick. But if you need a franchise quarterback, if they fall in love with him, everybody knows. If you like a guy, you take him. Don't overthink it. Don't try to outsmart other teams and try to be cute and move up and down the board. Just take your mans and get it over with. I don't know if Matt Corral is going to be that guy, but that's the pick.
All right, and takes us to the final pick for this part of the mock. First, the Philadelphia Eagles picks. They had 3 in the first round.
Yep.
It has to be defensive to me. I mean, there's a guy out there in Ike McWanu who I really think could be a good value pick at this spot, but I'll let that decision fall to you. Or maybe it's me next time when we do the 11th overall pick. But for now, I think you have to go defense and go defensively heavy. And you've got David Ojabo on the board. That'd be interesting. Brandon Graham, of course, is coming off a major injury. And you're losing Derek Barnett in free agency. So you're going to have to replace that spot. Mm-hmm. But Steven Nelson is also entering free agency. He's one of your starting corners this year. And this is very much a pick-your-flavor situation at the cornerback field. Because it could be any one of a number of guys. You want the athletic dude? Andrew Booth Jr. You want the shutdown corners? Ahmad Gardner, Trent McDuffie out there. Gardner being the bigger one of the two, Duffy being the smaller guy. And it's just, what do you want? Kyler Elam's out there. Kyler Elam's kind of split in the middle of things. I don't know. I feel like I really don't know which one is going to be the right pick here. I really don't know. But I don't. This is tricky. I would be fine with almost any of these guys because you could tell me any of them are going to be successful. You could tell me they're all going to be successful. I might believe you at this point.
But it's still, even though we're in December, it is still very early in the draft process. We still don't know who's actually going to declare. We still have to go through the combine, the private workouts, the college workouts where the teams go to college campuses and whatever pro days. We got a lot to sort through. So right now, what we're talking about, because we're going to be doing mock draft Mondays, okay? Every Monday. This is our first part of our mock draft series, but don't be confused. This is going to be totally different compared to 3 months from now. But it's a fun exercise to see where not only where we personally each view these particular players, but where we think these teams might be thinking at this point. So I'm with you, man. You could literally go any route, and I wouldn't laugh at you. I mean, I might laugh at you, but
I'm actually going to go. I'm going to kind of go for it all. I'm going to take Trent McDuffie. And I understand he's the smaller dude of the bunch and probably not going to go this high. But I just love what you see from him at Washington. This dude is one of the best tacklers for a corner in the NFL or in college football this past year. And throughout his entire college career, he's been a really sure tackler. He's been a lockdown corner. And I feel like he's going to succeed just because he's so small. You wouldn't expect him to compared to some of these other guys in the draft, which is why I feel comfortable taking him. I feel like the underdog in this situation is going to succeed. And he's a dude who I have a lot of faith in to be a really good corner. You have currently Darius Slay is having a really good resurgent year right now for Philadelphia. If he can continue to play well, put Trent McDuffie next to him, that's a really good cornerback duo.
Now, the fun thing is McDuffie is the smallest corner of all the projected upper echelon guys. I mean, he's listed at 5'10", 5'11", give or take, but all the other guys are no lower than 6 foot, and those are guys like Andrew Booth, Roger McCreary, Kyler Gordon, the other top-notch Washington corner. So there's definitely gonna be options. Scary Elam, Gardner, like you said. There's gonna be some choices. I'm curious to see where a guy like Martin Emerson and some of these other names go. Darian Kendrick from Georgia. I love draft season, man. It's it's gonna get so crazy between now and even not even the draft, but between now and like February, early March, it's gonna get out of control. I can't wait to see the foolery that goes on between now and then. But for the record, we're gonna go down this list 1 through 10. I picked first. We ping-ponged. So I had the first pick. He had the second. I had the third. So on and so forth. So first pick, Lions. Kayvon Thibodeau, edge rusher from Oregon. Second pick, Jacksonville Jaguars. Aiden Hutchinson, edge rusher from Michigan. Third pick, Houston Texans. Quarterback, Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh. Fourth pick, the Jets. Evan Neal, offensive tackle from Alabama. Derek Stingley Jr. went fifth to the Giants, corner from LSU. The Giants had the sixth pick as well. Sam gave him George Karlaftis, the edge rusher from Purdue. I went Kyle Hamilton, seventh for the Jets, safety, defensive player, athlete from Notre Dame. Eighth was the Carolina Panthers. Sam gave him Charles Cross, offensive tackle from Mississippi State. The Atlanta Falcons, 9. I went Matt Corral, quarterback from Ole Miss. And Trent McDuffie was the 10th overall pick for the Philadelphia Eagles, corner out of Washington. So that's our top 10 for our first mock draft Monday. Next week, we're going to be doing the next 10 picks. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way through 20. And since I started tonight, because I am a Lions fan, Sam's going to be starting us off on the next mock draft. And the 11th pick, part 2 of our mock draft here, and the 11th pick currently is with the Philadelphia Eagles. And all this is coming off of Tankathon. This is where I get my draft order from. So it's going to be fun next week. We're going to keep going through the first round. But for now, Sam, do you have any closing thoughts, questions, concerns, anything like that?
No, I'm all set. I'm all ready to go watch this Rams-Cardinals football game. This is going to be a real good one.
Hell yeah. I'm going to go get some wings, have some beer, and watch some football. Sam, real quick, you're on Twitter. What is your Twitter handle?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Sam_Teets. That's TEETS33. So I post all my articles, any YouTube videos, do all my draft content's going to be there for you. So definitely go check that out.
Absolutely. I already follow you, but I can strongly encourage all our listeners to follow you as well. You can follow me on Twitter as well at DB Talking Sports. That's D as in Dan, B as in Bob Talking Sports. Bob will be on there with me tomorrow to talk about the NBA. We have a weekly NBA show, 8 o'clock. Tune in for that. And before we go, I just want to say we are powered by betting.net, and it's not just sports betting. Betting.net compares the best online casinos. So sit back, relax, and play the top online slots, poker, and table games at betting.net. For Sam, I am Dan Kornhauser. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next week.